The stranger in the snow. The wind howled like a mourning widow across the empty plains of Montana. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, blurring the world into a single, colorless hush. Ethan Calloway tightened his scarf and pressed forward, boots crunching through the white crust. He had gone out for firewood. Just 15 minutes, no more. But even that brief absence left the homestead feeling like a distant memory. Then he saw her. At first, he thought it was a trick of the storm. A dark shape collapsed near the fence line, half buried in snow. But as he neared, the illusion sharpened into flesh and cloth. A girl, barely conscious, lay curled in a fetal position, skin tinted an alarming blue. Blood traced a thin line from her hairline to her temple, now frozen stiff. "God in heaven," Ethan whispered, dropping the wood bundle. He knelt beside her, fingers fumbling to check her pulse. It was there, weak but present. He didn't stop to question who she was or where she'd come from. He simply lifted her, wrapping his thick coat around her trembling body, and staggered through the snow toward the barn. He didn't take her to the house. His father, Reverend Samuel Calloway, was inside, and he'd have 100 questions. Instead, Ethan laid her gently on the straw-strewn floor of the barn, close to the stove he'd kept warm to comfort birthing livestock. He pulled an old wool blanket from the saddle trunk and covered her shivering form. She stirred. Eyes, dark, cautious, sharp despite exhaustion, met his. "You're safe," he said, voice low. "Don't try to move." Her lips parted, cracked from cold. "They're coming," she whispered. "You can't let them find me." "Who's coming?" But she passed out before he could get an answer. That night, Ethan sat alone on the barn floor beside her, arms folded, staring into the stove's glow. The girl's features marked her heritage clearly. Cheyenne or Lakota, maybe, but it was her presence that unsettled him. She wasn't just lost. She was fleeing something, someone, and he had brought her into his world without a second thought. By morning, her fever had broken. She awoke slowly, eyes darting around the barn. "You stayed," she said. "I did," Ethan replied. "What's your name?" "Mariah." "Mariah," he repeated. "I'm Ethan." A pause stretched between them, filled only by the soft breathing of the horses nearby. "Why were you out there?" he asked. She looked away, face hardening. "Because I refused to be traded." Ethan didn't press. The line was delivered with a finality that dared him to dig deeper. Later that day, as Ethan chopped wood near the barn, Claire appeared. His fiancée carried a basket and a gentle smile that no longer reached her eyes. "You missed supper," she said softly. "I had work," he replied, gaze locked on the log he split in half. "You're always working these days." He didn't answer. Claire stewed for a moment longer, then placed the basket on the porch rail. "There's pie inside," she said before walking back down the path to the main house. As her figure faded into the trees, guilt crawled into Ethan's chest. Claire was the kind of woman who wrote letters in perfect script, who never raised her voice, who kept her promises. And yet, for reasons he couldn't name, being with her now felt like watching a painted sky. Beautiful, but distant. When he returned to the barn, Mariah sat up, sipping the broth he'd left by her side. Her hands still trembled. "I shouldn't stay," she murmured. "If they find me here." "Who are they?" "My people. My father is their chief. I was meant to marry a man I didn't choose. I ran before the ceremony." Ethan blinked, absorbing the weight of her words. "Now they'll come," she added. "They'll bring the whole tribe if they must." He should have been afraid. Should have told her to leave that very night. But he only said, "You can rest here until you're strong enough to move." Their eyes locked again. There was a kind of silence between them that spoke louder than speech, a current of shared defiance, of quiet understanding. It wasn't love. Not yet. But something had shifted. That night, Ethan brought her an extra blanket. As he placed it over her shoulders, her fingers brushed his wrist. "Thank you," she whispered. He hesitated, then withdrew his hand quickly and turned away, heart pounding. Outside, snow fell again. But inside the barn, two hearts, both quietly aching, began to beat in rhythm. And far beyond the hills, in the dense forest, the first drumbeat sounded. Blanket of secrets. The snow melted slowly over the next 2 days, revealing damp soil and scattered pine needles beneath. But the barn stayed cold, and so did Ethan's thoughts. Mariah sat upright now, her strength returning in cautious increments. She wore a flannel shirt of Ethan's, the sleeves rolled nearly to her elbows. Her wound had closed, yet something deeper, in her eyes, in her voice, remained unhealed. Ethan handed her a tin cup of warm tea, avoiding her gaze. "You should leave soon," he said quietly. She took the cup without a word. The silence between them hung heavy, thickened by unspoken truths. Then, softly, "Do you want me to go?" The question pierced deeper than it should have. He didn't answer. Later, he returned to the house, boots muddy and coat damp from sleet. Claire sat at the kitchen table with her needlework, head bent in concentration. Her blonde hair, normally pinned up, had fallen in soft curls down her back. She looked peaceful, familiar. "You're late," she said without looking up. "I stayed to fix the barn door." "Hinges froze," he lied. Claire paused, then glanced up. "You've been distant." "I've just been tired." "Tired of what?" The question startled him more than it should have. Her voice held no accusation, only quiet observation, and that made it worse. "Tired of everything," he said finally, voice flat. "The cold, the waiting, the silence." Claire reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "You're not alone in this life, Ethan." He wanted to believe that. But lately, being around her felt like trying to love someone across a window pane. He could see her, reach for her, but never quite touch her spirit. That evening, he returned to the barn and found Mariah reading one of his old books. She looked up as he entered. "Your fiancée," she said. "She's kind." Ethan froze. "You saw her?" Mariah nodded. "Through the cracks in the wood. She brought you pie." He said nothing. "You haven't told her," she added. "Told her what?" "That I'm here. That we spoke. That I kissed you." The words hung like smoke. "I didn't kiss you," Ethan said. Mariah tilted her head. "No, but you didn't stop me either." The truth settled like frost between them. He sat beside the stove, watching the fire twist and curl. "I'm not the man you think I am," he muttered. "I never said you were a man at all," she replied softly. "Only human." The next day brought news. A rider from town arrived with whispers of tribal movement in the North Woods. 700 warriors, Cheyenne, likely, were marching westward, looking for someone, or something. Reverend Calloway grumbled over dinner. "If the savages come near my land, I'll have no mercy. We've been patient enough." Ethan clenched his jaw, eyes down. Claire placed her hand on Ethan's again, this time for comfort, not concern. "It'll pass," she said. "It always does." But Ethan knew this time was different. That night, Mariah sat cross-legged in the barn, steam rising from her tea. "They'll come for me," she said, watching the cup swirl. "You said your father was their chief." "Yes, Chief Tahoma. He believes in duty over desire." "And what do you believe in?" Mariah looked at him. "I believe a woman should be more than a bargain between men." He nodded slowly. "I ran on the morning of my binding ceremony," she continued. "It was snowing. I walked barefoot for half a day before someone chased me. Then I ran until I collapsed." Ethan stayed at the blanket covering her lap. "His blanket? You shouldn't have helped me," she said. "But I did." Their eyes met again, and this time, they didn't look away. The moment stretched, long enough for truth to grow dangerous. Then, without a word, Mariah leaned closer. Her fingers brushed his knuckles. Ethan didn't move. A part of him wanted to. A larger part didn't. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "For the trouble." "You're not the trouble," he said, voice barely audible. She hesitated. "Then who is?" Ethan didn't answer. He stood abruptly and moved to the door, breath uneven. Outside, the moon cast shadows through the skeletal trees. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat throbbed once, then twice. He closed the barn door behind him, leaving Mariah in silence. Inside the house, Claire was waiting by the hearth. "I washed your blanket," she said. "The one you usually keep in the barn. I found it folded on the hay." His heart stopped. "I hope you don't mind," she added, smiling gently. "You always said it brought you comfort." Ethan nodded slowly, forcing a smile. "Thank you." But inside, he knew something was unraveling. Something he couldn't stitch back together. And outside, in the dark woods, the warriors kept marching. The storm and the warriors. The storm rolled in without warning. Thick, dark clouds dragging across the sky like a bruise spreading over the horizon. By mid-afternoon, wind lashed against the farmhouse, rattling shutters and flinging dry snow in ghost-like swirls across the field. Ethan watched from the porch, jaw tight, arms folded. He wasn't looking at the storm. He was looking at the tree line. They were coming. From the edge of the distant hills, shadows moved with methodical purpose. Mounted warriors, dark silhouettes in the white void, pressed steadily closer. 700, maybe more. Silent, patient, unstoppable. Behind him, the door creaked open. "Who are they?" Claire asked softly, stepping beside him. Ethan didn't speak. Couldn't. "I asked Reverend Tompkins," she continued. "He said a Cheyenne hunting party passed near town 2 days ago. But this," her voice trembled. "This isn't a hunting party, is it?" Ethan turned to her. "You need to stay inside." "Ethan, please." She searched his face, saw the fear, not of the warriors, but of something else, something internal and unraveling. Without another word, she stepped back inside. In the barn, Mariah stood near the window, hands pressed to the frost-laced glass. Her breath fogged the pain. "They found me," she whispered. Ethan stepped inside and shut the door behind him. "We don't know that." "Yes," she said. "We do." Her tone wasn't panicked. It was resolved, almost reverent. "They won't attack," she added. "They'll wait. They want me to come willingly." "Then don't." The words escaped before he could stop them. "Stay." Mariah turned to him, her expression unreadable. "You don't understand," she said. "If I stay, your people will suffer. Your father will call for guns. Blood will answer." Ethan looked down. "I don't care." "You should." The silence stretched until it cracked. "I thought I could run forever," she said. "But freedom is just another kind of prison when it comes with hiding and guilt." He stepped closer. "You deserve to choose your own life." "I did choose," she replied. "I chose to run. I chose to find warmth in a stranger's barn. I chose to kiss you." Ethan's breath caught. "I won't let you be punished for my choice," she added. "And I won't let you break her heart for mine." "She doesn't know," he said quietly. "But she will." At dusk, Reverend Calloway gathered his neighbors and locked the church doors. Word had spread. Riders, guns, and warnings filled the air like smoke. The Cheyenne had made camp just outside the tree line. No movement, no threats. Just presence. Ethan sat on the edge of the porch, face in his hands. He had always believed life was a straight path, fence to field, prayer to meal, vow to altar. But now, everything curved. Nothing felt honest. Claire approached slowly, her voice gentle. "She's in the barn, isn't she?" Ethan froze. "I wash your blanket. I saw the hair. Long, dark." She paused. "I'm not blind, Ethan. Just in love." He looked up. "It's not what you think." "No," she asked. "Then what is it?" "I helped someone in need." Claire's eyes filled. "And did your heart go with the help?" He said nothing. "I waited for you," she said. "I gave you my loyalty, my trust, my future. I never meant to hurt you. But you did." Her voice broke. "Even if you never touched her again, you already gave her something you promised was mine." Ethan opened his mouth to speak, but Claire stepped back. "You should decide who you are before you ask anyone to follow you." She turned and walked down the steps, past the barn, and into the deepening snow. That night, the barn glowed dimly from within. Mariah stood dressed in her own clothes again, her wound healed, her posture proud. "I will go," she said softly, "before dawn. Alone. You don't have to." "Yes," she replied. "I do." Ethan watched her, wanting to say everything and nothing, wanting to freeze time in that space between surrender and escape. She walked to him slowly. "You gave me warmth when I had nothing. That's a kind of love." "I don't know what I gave you," he said. "You gave me the chance to remember who I am." She reached out, took his hand, and pressed something into his palm. The blanket. Folded. Neat. "When you wrap this around someone again," she said, "make sure it's forever." At dawn, Ethan stood alone outside the barn as the line of warriors opened, silently, to receive Mariah. She walked into their midst without resistance. One of them, a tall, broad-shouldered man, met her gaze and stepped forward. He did not touch her, only bowed. "Chief Tahoma." He looked at Ethan once, a stare not of anger, but recognition. Then he turned and rode away. One by one, the warriors followed, silent, proud, disappearing into the snow. And with them went the woman Ethan couldn't keep and the man he couldn't fully be. The quiet Finwell. Snow lingered well into the spring that year. It clung stubbornly to fence posts and shadowed ditches long after the rest of the world had thawed. The barn stood silent, door slightly ajar, the wind slipping through like a ghost that had forgotten it was dead. Ethan hadn't stepped inside since Mariah left. Each morning, he stood on the porch with a mug in hand, scanning the hills out of habit. He never expected to see her again. Still, he looked. The blanket she returned to him lay folded on the wooden beam just above the stall. Untouched, its presence was a quiet reminder, not of what had happened, but what had almost happened. What had dared to exist in a moment too fragile for the world outside. Claire left 3 weeks after the warriors disappeared. No letter, no final words, only a modest suitcase missing from the closet, and her engagement ring placed gently on Ethan's windowsill, nestled in the indentation where his childhood Bible used to sit. She deserved more than silence. But perhaps silence was all he had left to offer. He didn't chase her. He only watched as the stagecoach kicked up dust down the southern trail, shrinking until the landscape swallowed it whole. And then he sat on the porch, alone, staring at the ring in the fading afternoon light. Reverend Calloway never asked questions. Perhaps he knew. Perhaps he only saw a sun slipping further from his image and chose not to confront the reflection. Men must hold fast to their faith, he had said one Sunday, eyes fixed on the congregation. For storms come first to the unsure. Ethan had nodded, but his storm had passed and left him standing in a different season entirely. By summer, the fields returned to life. Wheat rose golden and steady, the cattle grew restless with heat, and the land forgot the tension that once stirred in its bones. Ethan worked the fields alone. The days were long, but they didn't drag. There was peace in labor, clarity in repetition. He no longer moved out of obligation, but for grounding. The world had fallen apart quietly, and now he was laying down its new shape, one fence post at a time. But still, the barn remained closed. Not locked, but sacred. A place not of sin, but of transformation, of truth. One quiet evening, as the sky turned lavender and the stars blinked into being, Ethan took the folded blanket and climbed the hill behind the barn. He sat beneath the oldest pine tree, its trunk scarred, its branches gnarled like reaching hands, and laid the blanket across his lap. The scent of her still lingered faintly in the wool, like smoke that had sunk into the fibers and refused to be scrubbed out. He unfolded it, not out of longing, but remembrance. He thought of Mariah, not as the girl he'd met in the snow, nor the one who kissed him under a broken roof, but as the woman who had chosen him for a fleeting breath in a lifetime of duty. She had returned to her people not in chains, but with her spine straight and voice her own. She had escaped, not by running, but by choosing. And what of him? He had learned that love without honesty is hollow, that loyalty without feeling is a prison, and that sometimes the betrayal is not in the action, but in the silence that allows love to wither unnoticed. He folded the blanket again, slower this time, reverent. It no longer belonged in the barn. It was not a token of guilt or regret. It was a symbol of a night where warmth met snow, of two paths that touched, then turned. As he descended the hill, the stars thickened above. Somewhere in the woods beyond the ridge, a single drumbeat echoed, faint, distant, and then gone. Not a warning this time, just memory. In the years that followed, People still spoke of that winter, of the girl who vanished, of the warriors who came but never fought, of how the preacher's son was never quite the same. They didn't know the full story. They didn't need to. Ethan kept it where it belonged, between his ribs and behind his eyes. He never married, never left the land. And though the barn aged and the fields changed, one thing remained. The blanket, now draped gently across the loft's crossbeam, undisturbed by wind or time. Waiting, not for her, but for understanding.